I am live tonight, and because of last week having the holiday week, I took the week off, so you were able to listen to one of the shows that I had from a previous episode, and I hope you gained a lot of great information from that. And I was hoping to have a guest tonight, but unfortunately there are some issues with my guest. Denise Michelle wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. And for those who were hoping to listen to her, I apologize. But it was really important that she wasn't going to be able to. I mean, she really wasn't going to be able to do this show tonight. And my name is Tom Russell. I'm your host for Life Without Limits. So I'm going to. It's almost at the last minute, folks. So bear with me, and we will have just an impressive show that I want to talk about some things about me and my books. And I've done this before, but I really didn't talk about my second book is what we're going to get into. But also my third book, my memoir, I'm going to read a few excerpts from that. But before we get into that, I wanted to answer some of the questions that I had from my guest from 2 weeks ago, Nicole Hausum. We talked about her situation with the bipolar disorder and how she was able to gain her life back. But I want to answer some of these questions that came in. It's real important because your questions are real important for me to answer. And Kyle asked the question, how would you know if something is wrong if you don't know? I didn't really know anything was wrong for the longest time, and it wasn't until I started to vocalize my feelings that we started looking for help. I believe having open conversations about how you're doing and how you're feeling can help you realize before it gets out of control. And Izzy asked, are there any mental issues that don't work well together? That's an interesting question, and this is what how Nicole answered it. Combining any mental health issues together can make things difficult. This doesn't mean you can't, but it does make it complicated. I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and PTSD, and we had to work to treat all of them separately while considering what would affect the others. And Lola asked, what if nobody realizes it's happening to someone? This is super common, Nicole says. That's why I'm very vocal about my mental health and educate. So people can see it in others and people struggling can know they need to ask for help. And Toby had the question that Nicole had a difficult time answering it. Do adults know, or is it the same, you don't know what you don't know? And this depends on how educated they are in mental health. Did they see the signs? My parents didn't see it, but I know parents who notice from a young age and teach them how to manage. And Kaylee asked, how can you get help if nobody listens? This is really a hard thing. Keep asking for help. Do your research. Find a therapist, a doctor, or a mental health service that will listen. You're in charge of you, so keep fighting. And Paige asked, then whose fault is it? We think that she was referring to what your therapist told you. And she said, I have to own up to my own mistakes and make amends. But I also know that I wasn't in control of my actions or what I was going through. I don't look to place blame on someone else because it's not effective. And Annie asked, where can you get a copy of the post you read? And the post, I don't have them in front of me, but if you want to look for the posts for Nicole, you can go to at Nicole Hausum, NicoleHowson, and look at a lot of her posts, and you're going to be able to find some of the things that she posted. So there you have it, folks. Those are the answers to the questions. So keep coming, keep sending the questions. I really appreciate them. It means a lot to me that you guys are very interested in the guests that I have, and hopefully you have some questions for tonight. And so tonight I'm going to talk about my memoir, and I'm also going to talk about my second book, Nowhere Man. And I think it was about, I don't know, it's March of 2020. I was talking about my memoir that it got put on hold because of COVID. I was working like 70 hours a week, folks. I was working a lot. So I kind of put it on the back burner, but now I've come full force, and I've been working on this book daily, trying to edit. I'm on my third edit now, so I keep adding things and subtracting things, and it's tough. So anyway, so I want to get started with the introduction of the book, and this is how it starts. You'll never amount to anything. Who are you kidding? Success and you should never be said in the same sentence. You don't deserve to achieve your dreams. Just when you think you'll get to the precipice of success, you're going to find a way to screw it up. You always do. How many times did I hear that? Before you think that it's rude for someone to tell me that, these words were never uttered to me by someone else. These words were said to me by none other than me. Time and time again, whenever I told others I was going to do something, I found myself retreating in self-defeat, self-doubt, and self-sabotaging negative talk. As I look back in my life, which covers almost 6 decades, I've cataloged numerous occasions where I've told people I was going to do something great, told them how it will change my life, and I found a way to screw it up. Holy cow, that's maddening to admit, isn't it? Nobody wants to fail in life on purpose, but there it is in true confession. Richard T. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, once said, "Winners are not afraid of losing, but losers are. Failure is part of the process of success, and people who avoid failure also avoid success." That, folks, was me in a nutshell. The thing about the trappings of success, well, we all define it in different ways. Though we all want to be financially independent and not have to worry about if you can even afford food to eat or have clothes to put on your back, I have never defined success as being wealthy, nor have I ever defined success by being famous. And it's never been my thing to be looked upon as a celebrity. No, I define success by looking at myself in the mirror every day and asking myself these simple questions. What are you going to do to inspire others? What are you going to do to encourage and uplift someone else today? When you feel the need to tear your life into shreds with self-doubt, what are you going to do? What are you going to say to yourself to eliminate that self-negative talk? That, my friends, is what success is all about. It's not about money. It's not about being put on a pedestal. It's all about taking that one extremely uncomfortable step of appreciating who you are, but at the same time realizing you have to do so much more for the human race than achieving upward mobility. So why did I take 52 years to come to that realization? Because I told myself I wasn't worthy. Achieving your dreams was meant for someone else, and I didn't deserve it. So when you read the account or what you're listening to the account tonight, I want you to understand it's not a lesson of self-loathing. You need to read it as if you're looking in the mirror. Now, granted, these events that occur will not be what you may have experienced in your life, but the elements of truth are never more apparent when you look back at your failures in your life and you wonder if you could have done something different to avoid your momentary defeat. I say you can't, and you shouldn't. What's the point of looking back at your life and pine, if I could have done something to change the results of this, my life would have been so much better, or I've nobody to blame but myself for my lot in life, so I have to accept that everything else that happens is a result of my constant failures. Bag it, folks. What's the point of looking back? You can't change what happens in your life. And man, I hated hearing that. I really did, but it's true, isn't it? You can't take back something you did or said because it's gone forever. The only thing you can do is learn from the things that hold you back and try your best not to repeat them. And it's easier said than done, I know. But once you get out of your heart or head that the past is the past, and the future is exciting. Can you imagine? Can you really imagine the things you can achieve? Now, it took me 52 years to believe that, but let it be known, if you ascribe to the unwritten rules of ageism that says once you reach a certain age, you might as well place your right foot permanently in the grave. So when you hear the account and read the account of my life in the following pages and what you're listening tonight, do so with the knowledge that I know I'm a champion. I'm a winner. I am. For all intents and purposes, the master of my own fate. And let me tell you, that's an amazing, amazing feeling. And the title of my memoir, it's going to be called, If It Is to Be, It Is Up to Me. And that's very poignant. It's very insightful as far as how I've lived my life the past, about 9 years, I think now. Man, I'm getting old. So So when I decided to write about my life, I was struck by the enormity of it. And how could I possibly encapsulate all of my experience in life interesting enough for someone to want to turn the page to read on further? I'm nothing special, and that's not a humble brag. I honestly think there are those out there in this world who have achieved much greater things in their lives than I have. What right did I have to write my own autobiography? I believe everybody has chapters in his or her life that are rich in wondrous history that should be chronicled, and I just happen to want to put it down on paper for all to read, warts and all. And I just wanted to just talk about a couple of things that I did, just to chronicle things that interesting things I did in my life. For instance, when I was young, my my four brothers and I, we were in the backyard and we staged a battle for the ages with my twin brother John. And my mother gave us these boxing gloves to duke it out with each other. But this day we were without gloves and we fought barefisted. And my oldest brother Bill took me aside and he whispered, "Hey, tell John that his shoe's untied. When he looks down, you need to attack him." Since he was my big brother, I listened to his sage advice, and once I told John, he looked down, and I reared my clenched hand from below my belt and unleashed a wicked and swift uppercut towards his chin. Needless to say, it was a short fight that day. Or I could tell you about the time that we were renovating my mother's kitchen. We had dug a huge hole in the hole in the backyard to place the wooden debris from the old kitchen. And once it was full, I was instructed to pour some gasoline on top. But for some reason, we decided to go to the hardware store for something and leave in the soaking pit before lighting it. When we returned, they intelligently told me that I needed to pour another gallon of gasoline on the pile and light it because they thought it dried up. Well, that was really smooth move because standing 6 inches away from the edge of the pit, I took a match and lit it and threw it in the middle. And as soon as that match hit, I heard this ominous, deadly whoosh emanating from the debris and followed by this jaw-shattering explosion. All I remember is falling on my butt and watching everything soar about 30 feet in the air. Now, being as athletic as I was, I had definitely pulled myself off the ground and I ran. But I somehow knew that my feat of stupidity would not go unnoticed, and I was right. My neighbor ran out of her house and she screamed at the top of her lungs, "What are you trying to do? Blow?"
Sorry to interrupt. I can't hear you. Can't hear you, Tom. We got as far as um we got as far as trying to blow up the whole neighborhood, but I don't remember what. I can't hear you. Check and see if you're on mute.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Hey, isn't this great? Live radio. Man, I just love doing this. This is fantastic. Well, I was talking about I don't know where we ended off, but I kind of just tried to blow up the neighborhood.
The neighborhood ran out and asked you if you were trying to blow up the neighborhood.
Yeah, I was trying to blow up the neighborhood. All right, that's awesome. And lastly, I was talking about I was an athlete. When I was in my late 40s, I took up long distance bike riding. It was nothing for me to travel 40 to 60 miles on certain days, and there was a certain freedom to witnessing the grandeur of the land. But every day there was a danger from every corner. You never knew how drivers would react to sharing the road with a bike rider. And on July 14th, 2010, my world almost came to an end. I was riding my bike home from work and I was trucking at a 20 mile per hour pace. Man, I was hauling. And I was traveling on the winding road and reached down for my water bottle. And when I craned my neck upwards, I knew I was in trouble. Parked on the side of the road was a maintenance vehicle. And I was perhaps, I don't know, about 2 feet away before I realized I wasn't going to make it out unscathed. and I violently slammed into the back of the truck full force. Though I was wearing a helmet, my face and chest took the brunt of the collision. And what's ironic about my memory of this incredibly terrifying event was remembering the red tag attached to the bottom right back of the truck and said, "Warning, makes frequent stops." What a coincidence. So did I. I remember sitting on the ground and looking at my feet and watching the blood dripping profusely on my new shoes, and I thought, crud, those are some great shoes I'm ruining. Everything turned white. The only way I can describe what my view was just imagine on a television show where the characters recalling a memory and the sound is muffled and the screen is foggy. That's what it was like for me. Especially everything was white and out of focus. The maintenance worker who owned the truck immediately came to my aid, as did a neighbor who witnessed my collision from across the street, and all I could think of at that moment was the condition of my bike. Never once did I have a concern about my personal welfare, and I guess that's what athletes do, you think? When the police called my wife to tell her I had a minor accident, she wasn't prepared to see the carnage that was my face. With splatters of blood matting every pore of my head, you couldn't even recognize me. My wife, being the ultimate caregiver, thought it was prudent to take my picture while I sat there motionless. And I actually glad she did that, because every once in a while I'll look at that picture and just marvel at God's grace that I survived such a horrific crash. The reason why I'm telling you all this, these events in my life, is how perseverance and courage is so prevalent in my life. If you look back at your life, you can remember events that occurred that could have been fatal for you, like crossing the street and narrowly being missed by a passing car, and going through a green light cautiously and watching a speeding car run the red light. The driver missed me by inches. Or when I fell down a tree 30 feet in the air when I was young, only to be stopped at the very end by a large branch. And we sometimes forget how close our brushes are with death, and we never consider all the wonderful things to be thankful for. We take for granted the small, inconsequential events that occur that would never happen if you'd gotten to that crosswalk or a few seconds earlier, didn't look at your left before entering the intersection, or how a properly placed limb on a tree broke your fall to the ground. I'm going further down because I want to get some things in here I could. But just to give you an idea about reason why I don't live by fear. I live by courage. And I do that with all elements of my life. And after I had that accident a year later, I was able to get back on the bike. And my very first time that I got back on the bike, I went to the exact same route where I had the accident. And as soon as I passed it, where the accident site was, I raised my fist. I said, "What's next, baby?" Because I'm just beginning. And it was such a great feeling. So I ended up riding my bike 40 to 60 miles a day. I was relentless, folks. I was. And I rode a 100-miler event in the local area here. And then I had the privilege of riding in a 100-mile bike event around the Indianapolis 500 Speedway, all 75 laps. And that was a joy. That was a joy. And then I rode a 125-mile bike ride for hospice a few months later after that. So there I was, because I decided that I was going to do something courageous and not let my fear of getting on the bike stop me. And it's an incredible feeling. And I'm just scrolling down here. And here's what we talk about with a success. Success means different things to different people, but the underlying theme of how you look at yourself when you wake up in the morning, realize you are enough, is the key. Wealth or fame or successful marriage don't mean diddly squat if you don't realize that your happiness level doesn't match your daily standards of existence. You are a gift from God. Your existence is predicated on how you choose to lead your life. Fact of the matter is, through my own personal journey, I've lived up to my God standards of excellence and character. But in case you're wondering, because I keep beating myself up, you can just hear it in my voice, right? In case you're wondering, I'm not beating myself up for making such a bold statement. I'm a human being subject to all the human frailties we all muddle through. That's a badge of honor I hardly embrace because though I always espoused courage to chase my dreams externally, inwardly I was a coward, cowering in fear that I didn't deserve to accomplish anything great. So yeah, I can boldly say I was a fraud. I just knew someone would eventually look at me and say, dude, you talk a good talk, but you suck at walking the good walk. And I bought into that. I never feared failure. I feared success. I always thought about, what would actually happen if I found myself succeeding in something and finish what I started. And I gave up on myself so much for so long. And finally, when I turned 52 and when I wrote my first book, Finding True North, Bully Teen Journey of Hope, that's when my life changed because I was able to do something that I really wanted to do. And I'm just going down here. And I've talked a lot of things about my writing career and everything and how things started with me. And I don't want to go through that much, but I just want to let you know that I know that when my mother, and God bless her soul, when I went to school to Purdue, she had no way to help me financially. And she raised these 5 boys virtually by herself because she was divorced when I was 5. There was no way she had the means to finish what she started. And that was the reason why I told everyone I was going back to Purdue, and I quit after the first year. But a lot of things changed in my life over my life. And when you just give up on your dreams, that's the worst place to be. I was able to be a managing editor for a national magazine called RV Trade Digest when I was 23. And that was a huge accomplishment because I thought I'd made it, but not for the reasons that you would think. Of course, when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm editor of a national magazine. Yay! But the thing is, it wasn't the money because I was only making $375 a week. And back in 1985, that was okay. But it wasn't the money. And I thought I could fall back on the prestige of having the job. But when you don't feel that you earned the position, it's kind of hard to feel like that you deserve to be there. And I worked there for 6 years kind of feeling that way. Although I excelled in what I was doing with the writing part of it, I really didn't feel that this was my place to be in my life. But that was my best job I ever had. But we're getting down to where I wanted to go. And I want to talk about why I am the way I am. And I have to say that it's because of my mother. And I think most sons say that anyway, right? But this time, though, I get dibs on saying that my mom was the best mother ever. She was my hero, not because she found a cure for some insidious disease or not because of her petitioning for women's rights. No, she was simply a mother who, despite all the odds stacked up against her as a single mother back in the 60s and 70s, she managed to show all of her children that love meant more than providing financially for us. She struggled mightily on that front, and we stretched the dollar as far as we could, but we always came up short. But you think we felt like we were left out on the good things in life? Not a chance. It never ceased to amaze me at Christmas time when we'd see a load of Christmas presents underneath the tree every year. Never mind that she had 3 jobs at times. She just wanted to let us know how much she loved and adored us. And like most of us, we'd like to think our mothers were the most revered human beings on the planet. They were the center of our universe. They were always there when we scraped our knees or stood mightily between 2 combatants trying to battle each other until one folded, or suffered the wrath of her dreaded pull-on-the-ear method of discipline. And she even offered her sage advice to a teenager whose ears seemed to go deaf at the right time. You can add my mother to that pantheon of saintly women because her exemplary life can best be described as a woman who enjoyed her personal walk with Jesus Christ and wasn't afraid to let anyone know it. Growing up with 4 other follically challenged brothers, we witnessed the struggles she had as a single mother, and she could have fallen into the trap of self-pity like so many other mothers experience, but her steadfast faith kept her on the right path. Unfortunately, as she valiantly attempted to lead us to live a godly life, we didn't necessarily heed her example when we were kids, but her unwavering devotion to the Lord rubbed off on us altogether as we got older. And living in a drafty house, she got sick, very sick. After taking her to the emergency room, she was diagnosed with double pneumonia. And she was unconscious for several weeks, and it took her months of recovery and rehab to get back on her feet. My wife and I were blessed to have her come live with us for 14 months because she could no longer live in our house because she was tethered to an oxygen tank that became her prison. But she soldiered on every day to get better. In fact, she decided to go out on her own to live in an apartment all by herself, and as it turned out, she wasn't ready. That was never more apparent when she had her stroke in the latter stages of her life, and my wife and I were in the unenviable position to comfort and care for her through her dying days, which turned out to be a few months after her debilitating stroke. She couldn't speak at all, but one day while I was at work, my wife called me and said someone wanted to talk with me. A few seconds later, I heard this frail, breathy voice on the other end saying over and over again, "I love you, I love you, I love you." Now that took my breath away, and up to that point, my mother said nothing. Though her speech was impeded from the outset, she came to speak more frequently later on, and so you know what she chanted mostly when the hospice nurse said she was near death? The Lord's Prayer in the 23rd Psalm, over and over and over. It almost sounded like a broken record, but she repeated with such committed faith that you couldn't help but be touched by her. But the most inspirational moments were the times in the middle of the night when we tended to her bed sores and fed her through a tube in her stomach. The dim lamplight shone on her motionless, frail body, and neither of us would speak a word. But we'd always leave her radio station at WFRN so she could soak in the inspirational music. Oddly enough, this one particular song, "The Candle," seemed to be on perpetual play every time we got in the room. To this day, when I hear that song, I'm taken back to those times of complete solitude because it always felt that the Holy Spirit had descended upon us so we could focus on my mother's care. Being so firmly ensconced in that solitary moment, listening to my mother's dying, shallow breathing, and viewing her fragile frame, I came to appreciate the sacrifices she had to make raising all of us. So to take care of my mother, with my wife's help, of course, she seemed entirely appropriate. And when the time came for her to be with her Heavenly Father, it was so serene, so simplistic. When I walked in to check on her one morning, I will never forget how she looked laying in her bed. She had her hands cupped, slipped serenely underneath her sunken cheek, as if she were praying. Her dark, lifeless eyes were perched open. Her parched mouth was slightly agape, as if she was in the middle of a passionate prayer. I figured out why she looked so peaceful when I peered to the side and saw this large, tattered portrait of Jesus Christ staring right back at her. She must have had one-on-one conversation with him, saying how much she was looking forward to meeting him once and for all. Several years later, those last few moments with my mother was most precious because I saw how her spiritual conviction was so strong, how her weak body was soon to be strengthened in the new body of Christ. For all intents and purposes, she was the best mother ever to walk the face of the earth. Wow, okay. I was fortunate to write and speak her eulogy at her funeral. I think it's important to really know how special she was, and this is what I spoke. The obituary will be obligatory. It will say our mother died after an extended illness. It will give a brief description of her work and family history, and tell us who the surviving members of the family are. Aside from a few generalities, that's pretty much it. Understandably, you can't pack a great deal of information in an obituary, but this one needed some embellishment. In fact, if the theme of her life had been presented several years ago, you could almost write a screenplay depicting the tribulations she faced. She was our Rocky. Just like in the Oscar-winning movie Rocky, never felt he was a contender for anything in life. Mom had a hard time believing she deserved the best for her. What Rocky lacked in inherent talent was made up by his unequivocal desire to persevere when others would have given up. It really wasn't so much talent issue with my mom. However, it's ironic that one of her best talents was her perseverance. During his training, Rocky did much soul searching, wondering if it was ever even worth having a title fight. During her training as a mother, she often wondered if she could buck up to the expectations that were thrust upon her. In the title fight, Rocky got pummeled incessantly by Apollo Creed. Any normal man would have succumbed to such a brutal beating in the fight for In her entire life, Mom dealt with a many crucial blows that would have buckled any person to his knees. But just like Rocky, she just kept getting back up. After getting knocked down to the canvas several times near the end of the fight, Rocky resolutely exclaimed, "I ain't going down no more." Though he didn't win that particular battle, he showed the world that it was the man in the fight that determined one's own character. He showed that the world that it wasn't the man in the fight that determines one's character. Rather, it was a fight in the man. Though Mom didn't win this battle either, her unwavering determination, particularly in those last couple months after she had her stroke, should become a beacon of hope for everyone. She was our Rocky. Time does not permit me to recount every detail of her life, but suffice it to say that every chapter would create a crescendo of interest after each page. Not because she was some liberated woman who was a pioneer in any particular field of endeavor, not because she paved a path and championed a concern for the benefit of motherhood. In fact, in the whole scheme of life, she was simply a single parent trying to raise 5 boys who possessed an extremely unusual and bizarre sense of humor in a tough world. There are scores of similar stories of a nondescript nature across the land of ours. But this story hits close to home. She was our mother. She was our grandmother. She was our sister. She was our friend. Her life over the past couple decades could best be described as one of uncertain struggle. She wanted the best that life could provide for us, but what was the most intriguing about her was that it wasn't so much for her, but more so for the people she loved the most. Many of you know how she was divorced when all 5 of us boys were in our formative years, and imagine the absolute frustration and uncertainty she must have gone through. Sometimes she thought she failed us, that she couldn't provide for us, but she couldn't have been more wrong. What she lacked financially is more than made up for her abounding love for us. It's amazing we had all those trees in our yard, but none of them seemed to sprout any extra money. What's more amazing, though, is that our pockets were never empty, and when we needed lunch money, we had it. When we needed that new baseball glove for the upcoming season, we had it. Present company excluded, some would say gloves wouldn't have helped much on the field anyway. When it came Christmas time, when things were the toughest, our tree must have been the most populated in the neighborhood, with scores of presents bursting from underneath. Giving was her greatest passion, but given the choice between that brand new Lego set or having her stay on this earth a few more years, we'd all choose the latter. But that didn't happen. She's gone on to bigger and better things. No longer will she be the frail, weakened woman we are so accustomed to seeing in those last few months of her life. She has a new body, and strong body in Christ, where disease is not existent. That was why it was so easy to let her go. It was so comforting to know that she was in a win-win situation. She stays on earth, everyone benefits from her loving embrace. She goes to heaven, then the Lord can benefit from her loving embrace firsthand. How can you not help but draw comfort in knowing that? Even Rocky would have been jealous. Her desire to be with the Lord became apparent when we came across a journal she was writing while she lived with us during recovery from double pneumonia. In it, she wrote these prophetic and comforting words to share with you. "There will only be joy and peace," she said. "No tears of sadness, because I'm in a better place than here on earth. Everybody's life has to end as we know it now, and it'll be just Jesus and all my loved ones, and meet John and Moses, all who went before me. Live one day at a time, which I didn't do very well until I got sick. So I pray everyone will do this, because all stress will be gone, and you'll be much happier. The Lord has blessed me with a wonderful family, and that's all a person can ask for. Material possessions are not important, because the Lord blesses you with just enough or in abundance. This has made me believe to rely on the Lord to get me through the bad times. This has made me stronger spiritually. So bless everyone until we meet again in heaven and be with Jesus. The Lord knew I wasn't ready, so he kept me alive until I got rid of all the junk in my life." Aside from that last sentence, she hit it right on the nose. She lived her life the best way she knew. She never swayed from her convictions, and she never compromised what was most important in her life: God, family, and friends. I read recently in a book by Og Mandino how precious life is, how a person should treat life as a gift and not a right. And in a condensed version, it reads, "I will live this day as if it is my last. This day is all I have, and these hours are now my eternity. I greet each sunrise with cries of joy as a prisoner who is reprieved from death. I lift mine arms with thanks for this priceless gift of a new day. So too I will beat upon my heart with gratitude as I consider all who greeted yesterday's sunrise, who are no longer with the living today. I will live this day as if it's my last. And if it is my last, it will be my greatest monument. This day I'll make the best day of my life. This day I will drink every minute to its full. I will savor its taste and give thanks. I will maketh every hour count, and each minute I trade only for something of value. I will live this day as if it's my last. And if it is not, I shall fall to my knees and give thanks. The final chapter from my mom's life has been written, and the story is safely tucked in the annals of our minds, where we can draw many fond memories of joy and laughter, and yes, unfortunately, some pain. We can tap into our biographical library anytime we want, but we won't need a library card to check out our memory, just a smile. Lastly, I'd like to recite a poem I wrote a few years ago when I read it to her, to her initial bout of pneumonia. It's called Life's Simplest Clue. When life seems to get you down, as you etch on your face a weary frown, when life's pressures inhibit your ability to cope with the prospects of upward mobility, when stress feeds on your emotional stability to claim you as another prize fatality, remember that patience is a virtue achieved by many with one simple clue. Give thanks and praise to the one we obey by reciting these words every single day. In Jesus' name we pray. Mom, you left a lasting legacy with all of this, and with all the turmoil that will happen in our lives, it's going to be comforting to know that you'll be right behind us, pushing us to persevere under all circumstances. That's the way you lived, so that's the way we shall live. That is the best definition for the way my mother was. And I want to thank you for allowing me to read this to you, and it's special. I'm surprised I got through it without crying. You know what a sap I am. So I wanted to read that, but I also want to read the passage from a couple passages from my second book. It's called Nowhere Man. It's about a insurance executive who is not the best kind of person in life. He didn't treat people very well, and he ended up getting amnesia, and he became homeless. So what I want to write about was like what it was like for him to be homeless. And I wanted to read some passages from this book, and I think it's important for you to understand. It's pretty. Actually, I'm not going to say graphic, but it depicts what it's like for someone to have no hope. And the character's name is Kurt. He had a meeting with another homeless person, and this is what he said. Kurt saw one such man who seemed oblivious to his surroundings. He decided to sit down with him to find out his story. He sighed as he sat his tired body next to the man. He was careful not to touch him because he didn't want to scare him away. Just a few inches away from him, he turned his head to talk with him. Hey, how you doing? He said, trying to break the ice. My name is Buddy. He was still a little uncomfortable announcing himself with that name, but it was beginning to get easier for him. The man just kept looking forward with a blank stare. Placed next to his frail body with a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels. That alerted Kirk that he was probably 3 sheets to the wind, and maybe that was how homeless people handled being out in the cold. Getting so sloshed you can't remember how the cold winds of South Bend affect you. Touch my JD and I'll chop your hands off, the homeless man blatantly shouted. Kurt was taken aback because the guy never even turned to look at him. Apparently the man was used to people trying to take his booze. Don't worry, mister, Kurt said, holding his hands up defensively. I just wanted to ask you a question. Let me guess, you want to know how someone like me could end up panhandling on the streets, he said with a stark, monotone voice. You want to know why I don't just get up off this sidewalk and try to get a job? No, that's not it. You want to know what's the best way to get people to feel sorry for you and toss you a few bucks? Or how about this one? You want to know why people walk by and treat me like I'm invisible? Kurt simply sat there, his mouth agape, not knowing what to say. Trust me, the man said, turning his body toward Kurt while sitting Indian style. I've heard it all. I've experienced it all. You think I don't know why what people say about me as they avert their eyes if I don't exist? They are disgusted with me, and all these other people sit here pleading for a little help. But we're treated as second class. No, make that third class citizens, because we look and act like it's our fault. We are here. We are shunned by society because we don't meet their standards for humanity. Kurt looked him directly in the eyes. I can see why you get defensive, and in case you haven't noticed, I'm just like you, but I seem to have been recently placed in this situation. He decided to be very frank with him and not worry how he was going to react. No, what I wanted to ask you is this. I can see, based on what you wrote in your cardboard, that you were looking to find a job. But what I'm looking at is that you're guarding a bottle of alcohol like it's gold to you. How can you justify what you plead for and then people see you guzzling booze? How dare you sit there and judge me, he yelled, throwing his hands in the air. You don't have a clue how I ended up here. And I'm not even going to bother to tell you the story of my life. I drink this booze, he said, grasping the bottle in his hand, because it allows me to paralyze my brain for a while so I can forget the pathetic life that I have now. The homeless man placed the bottle to his lips and turned the bottle up so he could take an enormous swig of its contents. He grimaced as the liquid slid down his throat. As he placed the bottle back down on the sidewalk, tears began to well up his eyes. Kurt could tell he struck a chord with the man, and he regretted bringing up the subject to him. You say you're homeless, right? Kurt simply nodded. I'm looking in a mirror talking to you. I was you in the beginning, kept my nose clean, tried finding ways to resolve my situation, and people tried to help, but finally I realized the only way I was going to survive out in the streets was to look out for numero uno. Ain't nobody cares why I'm here. Ain't nobody cares how I got here. The only thing they care about is chasing that almighty dollar so they can afford to buy all those nice things, cars, clothes, houses, so they can oppress everyone else. You look at me as a drunk, he screamed, pointing his accusatory finger toward Kurt. I can tell you by the look in your eyes. But I'm warning you, there's going to come a day when you realize that no matter what you try to get out of this hellhole, you're going to try to drown your sorrows in booze or self-medicate with drugs. That's how we survive. That's pretty stark. It's pretty stark. But trust me, I've had conversation with homeless people, and this is how I ended up writing the book. And this is when Kurt got fully invested in being, I shouldn't say invested, he was entrenched in being a homeless person. Alcohol is not free, unless of course it's shoplifted or stolen from a sleeping homeless person. It takes some creative begging on a homeless person's part to be the one chosen to acquire money from generous people. Though he couldn't remember every cardboard sign he made, he was smart enough to keep the most creative ones to generate the most income. I know who you are, but who am I? Read one ingenious sign. Stop me if you've heard this one. That one befuddled him. Apparently he was in a pun-filled, lucid mood that garnered a decent chunk of change. Help me get off the street so I can get back to running the country again. The last one he kept caused him great pause. God bless those who can't help themselves. After all, I could be your father, your brother, or son. Was he a father? Did he have children who were left without someone to look after him? What if he had a wife? Certainly, if he did, she would have done anything to get him back home. His life over the past month solidified his fate that nobody who might have been in his life really cared enough to find him. And the last one I want to read, I had great pause. I wasn't sure if I wanted to read this, but I think it's important because when you redeem yourself, when you feel like you've come out on the other end, and you've felt like you were able to succeed in life, you have to question about what kind of life you want to lead. After you were put in that situation. So this is a letter that he found that he wrote when he was with a pastor in a church, and he had it put. The pastor gave him this little notebook after he got his memory back. I won't go into detail how that happened, but this is what he wrote. I woke up this morning wondering why I even try to wake up. What's the point? My stomach grumbles with every move I make. I can't remember the last time I had a hot meal. Then again, if I did, I can't remember it. It's a vicious cycle every day. When is it going to end? More to the point, what do I need to make it end? God doesn't care about me. If he did, I wouldn't be standing here wishing anyone would treat me as a normal human being. Instead, I'm invisible to those who walk by me every day. Father Charles told me that God's children will reap the rewards of his bounty if we only believe in him. Believing in an almighty being is hard enough, especially when you see the devastation homeless people experience every day. So why do I even bother trying? I can pray and pray and pray, and when I get done praying, I can pray some more for good measure. I guess I should start now, shouldn't I? God, if you can hear me, I've got some questions to ask you. For instance, if you're all powerful and can map out someone's future in his book of life, it must mean you have the ability to intercede on the downtrodden's behalf and provide for his well-being. Yet here I am after months of being homeless, and I'm right back to where I started, still homeless. Why is that, God? Why should I even think that an unwavering faith that exists will always be a means to the end? Father Charles told me that faith is like the wind as it blows through your hair. You can't see it or taste it, but you know it's there. Why is that, God? I pray to you, God, that you put me out of my misery. It's a simple prayer, since you purport to allow people to do anything they want with their lives as a lesson in free will. I implore you to plant a seed in my head that will make me want to leave my earthly bounds. I know you've got plenty of other people in the world who are far worse than I am, so why don't you blind a bus driver momentarily as I walked across the street in front of him? Teardrops fell down Kurt's cheeks. Getting his memory back was like a double-edged sword. He remembered writing that note to God during his lowest level of despondency. Every high that he experienced was contrasted with the debilitating lows that took a bigger piece from him. Despite his reluctance to read further, he wanted to see how he was able to overcome his depression. So I turned the page, and this is what he wrote. I can't explain how I feel today. Day after day, I struggle mightily with survival. But today, it's really weird. I woke up this morning with a renewed sense of life. I certainly didn't have any reason to, but I feel like a higher power, be it God or something else, is directing me down a path where I need to go. I have this itching feeling that I will soon get my memory back. When that happens, what kind of man will I become? Do I go back to my previous life, whatever that is? Or do I pursue a life where I can reinvent myself? I have this nagging feeling that this kind of life I led before was full of selfish acts, making people feel like they were worthless pieces of trash. How can I go back to that? I've seen life on the other side. I've seen people look at me with total, unadulterated disgust, spitting on me, laughing at me, berating me, even ignoring me. How can I justify being an advocate of such distasteful behavior? When I get my memory back, I want to completely change how I treat people. I want to make them feel like their life is worth something, and to show them there are people who really care about them. I loathe the life I lived before, but this much is true. I vow to come back a better person. I'm really proud of this book. I'm very proud of this book because it shows a different side of humanity on both ends. Because you talk about how we as a society tend to treat homeless people as second and third class citizens, and they are not worthy of any compassion. And I thought that whole thing about him finding redemption from how he was on both ends, because when he was a bad person, he did treat homeless people as worthless pieces of trash. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of that book. So if you're interested in getting that book or Finding True North, A Bullied Teen's Journey of Hope, you can go to my website, lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. That's lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. And if you like what you heard tonight, ask questions or send me an email. And either way, I like to hear from you. And I thank you for your patience. And I promise next week and the following week, I'm going to be having an actual guest here. So I'm really happy that I was able to share my life with you. And as I end all my shows, I want everyone to smile infectiously, laugh genuinely, love unconditionally, and live courageously. I believe in you, and I know this week is going to be the best week of your life. I promise you, it's going to happen. Have a great week, folks.